Okay, starting a little late because of our extended pre-conversation, but let's go ahead and get down to work, and we'll make up some time. I'm going to see how much of Mishnah chapter 9 we can get through. Then we've only got one more chapter, so we're getting there.
Did you decide already?
I haven't decided what we should do next. Let's see how much we can get done, and then we can talk about some of the options. I've looked through a few different options, and we'll talk if we get enough done. Right? That's the candy. If we get through all of our studies, then we can talk about what we might want to do next. All right. So according to my notes, we were on Mishnah 3 of chapter 9. We were talking about sharecropping.
We finished.
We finished 3.
We start 4.
We finished 3?
Yes.
Okay, so if we finish 3, right? Okay, so quick review, right? We finished. We're talking about the notion of sharecropping. The idea being, and again, forget the negative stereotype of sharecropping from the American experience. That was often a form of exploitative servitude. And this sharecropping was supposed to be between equals, one person who owned the land and one person who had the labor. And what we've been talking about is how does the sharecropper and the landowner, how do they handle strange circumstances or unusual circumstances? So the last one was the idea of if the field was going to be left fallow, and now we're going to deal with a different form of leaving the field fallow. So I need to get a volunteer to read, or we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 around the room, shall we? All right, Stephen, I'm pointing at you.
I'm one.
You're 1 for Mishnah 4.
According to this Mishnah,
Oh, go ahead and start at the very top of the page. Yeah, there's no introduction for this one.
if one leaves the field from his fellow and he did not want to weed it, and he said to the owner, "What do you care? As long as I pay you the agreed rental."
All right, pause there, just because this is so modern, right? So this is the guy, he's rented the field, and you know what? He's not gonna weed it. He'll grow on it, but he's not gonna bother weeding it because that's not his field. And he says to the owner, "What do you care whether I weed it or not? I'll pay you what I've agreed to pay you. I don't want to do the extra work of weeding." What's the answer? Keep reading.
They do not listen to him, for the owner can say to him, "Tomorrow you will leave the field, and it won't bring forth anything but weeds."
The field is more than just you renting it this year. Eventually, you may go and not be my worker anymore, not be my sharecropper, and someone else will want to rent the field, or maybe I'll want to I'll use the field myself. And if it hasn't been tended to, if the weeds have been allowed to take root and really spread, then I'm going to have to go through and clean the entire field to get it back into a usable state. So no, you can't just say, "What do you care as long as I pay you the rent?" Think for a modern example. Imagine someone's renting a home and they don't want to do the yard work. They don't want to mow the lawn. They don't want to trim the hedges. And the landlord comes and says, "Look, I need you to mow the lawn. I need you to water the lawn. The grass is going to die. I need you to trim the hedges. I pay you your monthly rent."
The house loses its value because of it.
Exactly. The house loses its value. Eventually, you're going to leave, probably soon if I have my way. And who am I going to rent it to next when the lawn is dead and the hedges are 19 feet tall and there's vines growing over everything because you didn't want to do the work? I mean, yes, you paid me the rent, but you didn't keep up the property the way it was supposed to be kept up. And that's part of the agreement, is that you have to do the basic work. Even if you're paying the rent, there's also a basic upkeep in the expectation list. Make sense? Makes sense. All right, Mishnah 5. And Yerach, you're reading for us?
Yeah.
This one's in the middle of the page, yeah.
Mishnah 5. If one leased a field from his fellow and it was not fruitful, if there was enough produce to make a heap, he must still tend to it.
All right, so this is dealing with a case where I'm the sharecropper. I've planted the field, I've weeded the field, I've done everything I was supposed to, and it comes time to harvest, and you know what? It's a lousy year. The wheat just didn't really come up. And I'm looking out at this field going, it's going to take me a week and a half to harvest and clean this field, and I'm going to have a couple pockets full of grain. Why bother? Right? Why should I bother to go out and harvest this thing? Just forget about it. But of course, the answer of why do I have to bother? Because if I owe a percentage to the owner, he gets a percentage of the nothing. And so the question is, how much nothing is so much nothing that you don't even have to bother? And the first answer, the answer of the Mishnah is, if there's a heap, then if there's enough that it's like not just your pockets, but a little bit of a mound of grain, you have to harvest it. Even though it's not really worth your time, you owe a percentage to the landlord. And he deserves to get that, right? That's why he rented the land to you, was because he was expecting a percentage. And it may not be much, but he still deserves it. So get out your sickle and go get it. But if there's not even a heap, if there's not even a little pile, then yeah, okay, fine. Just let it go and we'll plow it under and we'll try again next year. That's the basic opinion. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Yeah, you're on.
I have a problem.
Okay, yes.
No, not with what it says here,
Yeah.
but this doesn't fit my book.
Okay.
Mishnah 5 here
Hold on.
talks about somebody who rents and he wants to plant seorim.
That's next.
That's the next.
That's the next one. So let me see real quick here.
Something is fishy.
That's why.
No.
Well, probably when you buy a cheaper version.
See what's here. That's okay. I'll find
Are you
out.
missing a page?
I think so. It says here. I don't know. That's okay. I'll find out later.
Yeah, so
Yeah. I think it's this one.
yeah, that is Mishnah 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're missing a page. No, but that's 5, 6, 7. That's supposed to be 8.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be fat. It's a typo. Okay.
Oh,
Next time.
Yeah.
we found the.
Next time.
The Hebrew copy of the Mishnah has a typo in it.
Yeah.
So it lists it as Mishnah Hey, but it's actually Mishnah Chet. So go back to Mishnah Hey and finish with Rabbi Yehuda says.
Rabbi Yehuda says, what type of measure is a heap?
Right. Now you have to read. You got to read that. What's a heap? Right.
Stupid question when there's a little bit more than a bunch.
Exactly right. It's not quite a lot. It's not quite a bunch. It's a heap. Well, and there's another problem with the definition of heap. Right. Heap is implying a fixed measure. Right. Like let's say it's 50 pounds. What happens if it was a giant field? What happens if it was a small field? Right. So it's a giant field, but it's going to make 50 pounds worth of grain. Do I really have to harvest the whole field because it'll make 50 pounds? Or, right? I mean, that's a lot of work for almost nothing.
It's not efficient.
It's a fixed measure. Seems a little odd because different fields are harder work. So Rabbi Yehuda has a different measure.
Rather, he must tend to it only if it is yield as much grain as was sown there.
All right, so farming 101 for you, 101. When you farm, back in the days before you had seed companies like Monsanto and all of them, Monsanto? Right, Monsanto. Your seed for the next harvest came from this year's harvest. Right, so you'd go out and you'd get the grain, get the wheat, and you'd break open the wheat and you'd use some of it to make your food, but the rest of it you'd put away. And next year, you'd be putting that out to seed for the next harvest. So Rabbi Yehuda says, look, if there's enough grain growing that if you harvest it, you can reseed the plants for next year, that's worth the effort. Right, that's worth the effort because, at least you'll be able to keep the field going and next year you'll be able to start over again. But if there isn't enough growing, if it was just a terrible year.
What do you eat? Like if there's only enough for the next year, and from there also you You need to alimentate yourself, feed yourself during this year, and also to exchange for all the product. How do you live? Because they are forcing you to work at least for a little, but with a little, you will starve hungry. So it's not.
You'll starve more slowly.
Yeah, but it's not better to say, you know what? Sorry, it's not enough. I prefer to go to a different land, a different field, be on salary. Okay, but at least I can provide to my family, because this is not a good solution. I can see that a different perspective from that situation.
And that's a good perspective. And you're absolutely right that it gets more complicated when you have to figure in, well, is this the only field the sharecropper is working? Or is this one of his fields? Remember, some people, they would sharecrop 3, 4, 5 fields, and one field wasn't doing so well. They would just go to the investor and say, hey, man, I know you wanted me to do this field, but it's coming up bad. I have 4 other fields to work on, sorry. No one's starving in that case. But you're right, in some cases, this might be the only field, in which case this person will need to work to provide for their own family, and that usually would be negotiated with the owner of the field. But if there's enough that the court says you've got to do it, then how can you break your contract? Right? Let's imagine you were hoping it was going to be a beautiful year, or let's imagine there was an illness, and so all the other workers got killed, and now there's someone else who says, I'm going to hire you, for 500 times what you're going to make off this land. Well, even if the land was productive, you'd probably say, hey, I got to feed my family. Bye. And the Mishnah says, no, you have a contract. Right? A contract is a contract. Now, the contract shouldn't force you to starve to death. But if it means you can't make as much as you hoped, but you still get to fulfill your contract, then you have to fulfill your contract.
The question is what you hope, what can be realistic. I don't want to be billionaire, have a huge,
exactly.
But you know what, I need a certain amount of money of food for my family for the year.
Right.
I don't want like a huge year bonus here. If I see that there is no chance for the minimum, must be an way to break the contract.
Yes.
For kind of pikuach nefesh, because actually the entities come from there.
And that's what they're really arguing about here, is that what is the minimum? And if the minimum is going to be
It's very minimum.
what, enough to replant the whole field? I mean, that's the whole point. Agriculture, if there's enough seed to replant the field, that is how you keep the field going so that you can not starve to death next year. Right? That's your future.
But still you have the present. In order to arrive to the future, you need to pass a year.
Right. And
the
so
present,
right. And so you could always eat the seed that you were going to use for next year. That was considered a mark of poverty, when you had to eat your seed rather than saving it for the next year. People did. And then you would have to take out a loan to plant the next. Or you would go to the landowner and say, look, I've got no seed for next year. Give me the seed and I'll give you an extra 5% off the harvest. You would often have to buy the seed. And in fact, that was how it could become exploitative in America, where the person who was sharecropping had to buy the seed from the owner, they had to buy the tools from the owner or rent them, and they would charge.
After the Civil War.
Exactly. And they would charge ridiculous rates. Now, the Mishnah is trying to protect both sides, because just as you have unscrupulous landowners, you also have unscrupulous workers.
So there's not any way in any place in this Mishnah, okay, maybe not here in this book, but that give you the tool to break the contract in case of extreme, you don't want to come to there, because at the end you will lose everything. At the end you lose you can lose your freedom also, because if you start taking debt, you become a slave because you need to pay back.
Well, actually, yes. I mean, but slavery was, for the biblical form of slavery, was to take care of the poor, not to punish them. But let's back up for a second. So the question is there a point where someone is so poor or so destitute that we break their contract?
Yeah, there's any opening.
The short answer is yes and no, which is 6 years out of the year, out of life? No. Every 7th year? Yes. We break the cycle with the sabbatical, right? The debts are canceled, and that it goes back to square one. But for 6 years, no. And that was something that the rabbis were very clear about. You don't break a contract because someone is poor. Let's imagine you have a car crash, and someone hits your car, and they're very, very poor, and you're in the court case, and the judge is looking and saying, well, you know, you're middle class, he's poor, I know he dented, ruined your car, but if I make him pay, there's no way he can afford to pay. So, you know what? No damages. Where's the justice? Right? The Torah says very clearly you cannot decide the case for rich or for poor because they are rich or because they are poor. You decide the case because of the case. After you've decided the case, then you help the person. So in a case like this, where you have a poor person who owes damages.
Or not only poor person, also could be middle class, but if you see that
a bad year,
very extreme bad year, like you need to do something.
Right, but the contract would still stand. And if the person needs to break the contract, you break the contract, you pay the penalty. And if you can't afford to pay the penalty, that's where the community helps.
So you see the solution in this case, in my case, is go to welfare state, okay, with the community helping.
Absolutely, that's called tzedakah.
Giving you food
right.
For the whole year, and that's it. That's the way to survive.
Or you do other work, right? So you break the contract, the penalty is owed to this person, but the court agrees that you can pay the penalty over time, and so you're going to go work as a hired laborer rather than a sharecropper, and you'll pay him back over time, and the community is okay with that. Or if you need extra help with your food, people will help you with tzedakah to make sure that you can still have enough. But as soon as you start saying the contract because we're taking pity on you, then the court is no longer doing justice. And that is a problem because the contracts are built around a system of trust. They're built around a system that I expect you will finish your side and you expect I will finish my side. And we both know that if we break it, the court will be angry, will come down against the person who broke it. That's what contracts mean. And if we can't trust that because, well, maybe the court's going to like you more than me, or maybe the court's going to feel sorry for you more than they feel sorry for me, then we no longer have law. Now we just have people sitting in the Beit Din picking and choosing the people they like. And the rabbis were very, very clear that they did not want that. The Torah is very clear that that's not justice. You try to prevent it at all costs. You try to get people to compromise. You try to say, look, if you come to the court, what are you going to get from this guy? He's penniless. But if the person goes to court and they demand their rights are their rights. And then the court has to try and help, and the community has to try and help somebody who, though poor, is now going to be paying the court penalty. And that's just necessary in order to make sure that we still have a system of laws rather than a system of a few rabbis and judges who are deciding who gets justice and who doesn't. Tell me a good story about how bad your life is, and then I'll let you go. Really? That's justice? Or, well, he's so rich, he won't even miss that. I'm sorry, a rich man deserves justice too. Or a poor man, you could say, oh, he's so poor, he's going to be dead next month anyway. Why should we bother penalizing the person and making him pay? Because it's justice. Now, if justice leaves somebody exposed, then we take care of them. We help them. Right? If justice says you have to give up your home, we don't leave the person homeless. They have to give up their home because that's the law. Then they have to give up their home because it's not their home. If someone comes in and illegally takes up residence in someone's house, and the guy comes back from vacation and goes, "What are you doing living in my house?" Well, he's homeless. You have to let him live there. You're wealthy enough. You can have a hotel room or go live with your family. No, it's my house. Get him out of my house. But he should find a place to live, but not at my expense and not at the expense of justice. At the community. And that's, again, I think we've said this before. If we haven't, I apologize that I didn't. And if we have, I don't apologize for repeating it because it needs to be repeated. You can't have a system, a society that is only justice with no compassion, no community, no society, no help from the people around you. And you can't have a society without justice and only the good feelings of everybody else. You need both. And hopefully the good feelings and society, community help, that should be 90% of what happens. Oh, I saw so-and-so at the market. He looked like he was a little hungry. Why don't we try and help him find a job? That's what most of problems should be fixed by. But 10%, every now and then you're going to hit problems you need to go to court over. And when you go to court, you need to be clear that you're following justice rather than the other. Okay, let's move on. It's a very, very important and very very meaningful topic in every generation. Now we're going to talk about other bad problems. I believe, Natan, that it's your turn for Mishnah 6.
If one leaves a field from his fellow and the locust devoured the crop, or it was blasted by strong winds that caused the grain to be prematurely separated from the stalks, if it was a rational mishap, he may reduce the amount of the rental agreement.
All right, so first of all, there's an implication here that isn't clear, but let's make it clear.
But that's again whatever we learned before, because before every time that was a natural disaster, you needed to pay back no matter what.
Right, so that's what we're going to try and work around here, right? So if I have leased the property, remember there are two ways for me to pay. Two ways for me to pay. One, I can pay you a percentage of what I grew, right? 10, 15, 20%. Or I can promise you a certain amount of food or a certain amount of money. This is talking about the second case, right? If I'm paying you a percentage, then you're going to get a percentage of the locust crop, which is going to be almost nothing. And if I'm going to give you a percentage of the blasted crop, you're going to get your percentage, but it's going to be almost nothing, especially if it's less than a heap. But if I promised you $500 and now the locusts come through, what happens? And the answer here is if it was regional. If it was regional, then we reduce it. We don't necessarily remove it, but we look at what the damage was for the entire region. How much did the locusts wipe out? What reduction do we need to make? As well, half the crop was lost, so half of what you owed is going to be forgiven.
Who is the he in that sense? That he may reduce the amount of the rental fee. The owner, I assume.
Well, no, it's actually the court that makes that assessment. So the person who is paying it back will have it reduced on their behalf by the court. It would have been better in English in passive voice, but that's what it's referring to. Yeah, you don't just sit there and say, yeah, man, a locust came. Sorry. Yeah. Because that is precisely what happens in part A.
But it's not against what we learned before. We learned before that if you are renting something, a cow, or anything, any tool that is a natural disaster, and you are renting but die, it's your problem.
No.
Need to pay back.
If you're borrowing, renting, you're not.
You're right.
Right. Yes. Renting, you don't have that liability. Borrowers have that liability. Okay. But part B is, so this is protecting the rights of the worker. That I promised you 500, but the locusts came. What do you want?
And why rational and not local?
Why
rational
and not local? Read the next sentence.
If it was not a rational mishap, he might not reduce the amount of the rental agreement.
Funny, the locusts only hit your field.
What happens local is the county.
No. No, they mean like the local region, right? But if the bugs only killed your field and not his field and his field and there and all the other fields?
I mean, local is for them only the area, only the state or the area. Because, for example, local is only Orlando or region is the county? Or
No.
What are the dimensions here?
Regional means the area that you live in.
Okay.
Right.
And local is...
But it doesn't use the word local, does it?
No.
Right. It says locusts. That's the bugs. But it doesn't say local. Right? So if it's not a regional mishap, that means it only happened to your field. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So this goes back to protecting the owner, which is, well, did you spray for bugs? Did you cut down the trees that were blocking the winds? Did you do something that is there a reason why your field, my field, got blasted, but no one else's did? Because I'm pretty sure the wind doesn't only blow on that field. And that means that if it's not a regional mishap, either the sharecropper was mishandling the field or he's lying and something else caused the problem. Man, I came out in the morning and the locusts had eaten everything. Funny, they didn't eat anyone else's. But I did notice that a lot of what you say, a lot of the field looks like it might have already been harvested. I wonder whether you just harvested it and sold it on the black market. Right. So the issue here is whether or not if it's not believable that what happened was a catastrophe for everyone, and therefore you're just caught up in it, then we begin to suspect that the sharecropper is either lying or was negligent in how he was taking care of the field. I mean, if only you got hurt by this blight, there's something wrong about how you were taking care of the farm. Make sense? Maybe? Okay, Rabbi Yehuda goes ahead and adds on a little bit more of a twist.
If you had leased from him for a fixed amount of money, in either case, he reduce the amount of the rental agreement.
Right, so this is a debate we're not going to go into, but Rabbi Yehuda is basically saying, no. I don't care whether it was the earth opened and swallowed the whole county. If you owe me 500, you owe me 500. It could be the entire region or just your field. Whatever the problem was, if you promised 500, now, that's a debate we're not going to go into, but Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is based on the idea that a contract is a contract is a contract.
And he lost.
We're not going to go into how the Talmud tries to reconcile it, so it gets more complicated. But yeah, the short answer is Rabbi Yehuda doesn't come out on top completely, but it goes into more detail of how do you know who to believe and how much is your responsibility and nature's responsibility and the field's responsibility. How do you work out the liability for who did what for the payoff? And then who's responsible to pay what. It's hard. Imagine as a worker, you're working for a company and you're doing your job, you think, and your department doesn't meet their quarterly goals. Is that your fault? Is it the industry's fault? Nobody's making any money at this right now, boss. Or is it some combination in between? Maybe you didn't work quite hard enough, but the industry's also not doing so. It's a difficult way to assign liability, and this is trying to give a general rule for protecting the worker and the landowner. All right, let's go ahead and continue on getting something, again, that shows the protection of both worker and landowner in Mishnah 7. And I think we're back around to you.
If one leased a field from his fellow in return for 10 koren of wheat a year, and it produced bad wheat, he may pay him out of his crop.
Right, so I promised you 10 koren, right? That's a measure of wheat. And I harvested the wheat, and you know what? It was lousy wheat. It just wasn't that good this year. It wasn't very tasty. It wasn't very fine. It was dry, whatever it is that makes wheat bad wheat. You're getting 10 koren of the bad wheat, right? Because I promised you 10 koren from this field.
If it produced good wheat, he can't say, I will buy other wheat from the market. Rather, he must pay him from the crop of that field.
Right? Again, it's so modern. Koren of wheat, but I'm going to go sell the good wheat, buy my profit to buy bad wheat, which will be short sell, and then I'll hand that over to the owner of the field, and he'll get the amount of wheat he's supposed to get. It just won't be as good as what the harvest would have been for him. And the Mishnah says no. If it's bad wheat, it's bad wheat, and we're not going to force the worker to go buy good wheat to give to the owner. But if it's good wheat, hey, it's the owner's land. He got lucky because it paid off, and you have to give him from that field. You're not allowed to mix it up with something. Substitute, exactly. That's the word. Substitute. You can teach me English. You're not allowed to substitute for something just to make your profits go further. You share in the risk. You share in the reward or the penalty. All right. Not too much debate about that one, right? Mishnah 8. This is where we were before.
Mishnah 8. If one leased a field from his fellow with the condition that he sow barley, he may not sow wheat.
All right. Farming 201. Wheat and barley have a different effect on the soil. Soil, before modern fertilizers and all of that, soil would go bad. You would take too much out of the soil if you didn't put more back in, and it would become unproductive. And different crops sucked more from the field.
Potatoes are worse.
Potatoes are the worst. Yeah, I don't know that. That's farming 301.
I live in the woods and work in the field.
All right, so potatoes really take from the ground. That's good to know. Well, apparently, and again, no firsthand experience, but going by the commentary, apparently wheat is worse for the ground than barley. Wheat takes more than barley takes.
But wheat is better as a product than barley.
Absolutely. Wheat is considered more expensive, and it's considered tastier. It has more calories. It's a better product, but it takes more from the ground. So if I promise that I am going to sow barley in the ground, and then I go, seems like a good year for wheat. Maybe I'll do wheat instead. No, you may not do that. However,
but if he leaves the field with the condition that he sow wheat, he may sow barley.
But go ahead and read the next line.
Rabban Gamliel forbids this.
All right. So why would the Mishnah have an opinion that says if you do it the other way, it's okay?
You're doing less damage.
Less, yeah.
Exactly right. Just like if you remember when we were talking about renting animals and you had the valley goats and the hill goats, and it's okay to take the hill goats to the valley goats, but not the valley goats to the hill, because, it's exactly, and they're going to die. Well, it's okay to go from if you have permission to do the worst damage, it's okay to do less damage. Because clearly if he said wheat was okay, then obviously the owner would be happy with barley, because the long-term effect is going to be less damage to his soil. And again, this would be, of course, if you were still going to be ending up paying him the same amount, right? The same payoff in the end.
Fixed that. Can't be able to do a percentage then.
It would be tricky. Like, where's my percentage of barley? Or wheat rather, right? But Rabban Gamliel, he holds a contract is a contract. And if you agree to do wheat, you can't do barley, even if it would be better for the dirt. You can't change the contract because that wasn't the deal. And perhaps the owner had other reasons why he wanted wheat sown. Maybe there was something else in his mind. So you got to stick with the program. But the general principle does follow, like I said, what we did earlier, which is if something is approved for more strenuous, it's automatically approved for more lenient.
So Rabban Gamliel's opinion is not.
It doesn't rise to the majority, yeah. And similarly, similar idea for part 2.
If one leaves the field from his fellow with the condition that he sow grain, he may not sow beans.
Go ahead and keep going.
But if he leaves the field with the condition that he sow beans, he may sow grain. And again, Rabban Gamliel forbids this.
Right. So again, same problem with apparently beans do more damage than grain, and just wheat and barley, but any kind of produce, you can't do worse to the land than was originally allowed. But there is a twist that we're going to add in Mishnah 9. All right, Natan, you ready to see about flax and sycamores?
If one leaves a field from his fellow for about a few years, he may not sow flax, and he has no right to cut beans from the sycamore tree.
Okay.
What is flax and what is?
So flax is a type of plant that grows that you use to make linen. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And it was very important in the ancient world. That was one of the main sources of cloth. People had wool and they had linen. That was it. We didn't have any cotton, no nylon, no polyester. Yeah, just linen and which came from flax and wool. So the question here is beams. One of these in the roof.
It would allow.
So imagine you want to build your house, right? How are you going to hold the roof on? You need beams.
Oh, okay.
And then you can put your roof on top.
Okay.
And the problem here is, I mean, not this big of the beams, but the problem here is you're only leasing it for a couple of years. By the time you're done, the ground will not have recovered from the flax, because flax is really bad for the dirt. And the beams, the branches of this tree will not have grown back. So by the time you leave, my land will be worse than when I gave it to you. However, part A will give us the contrast.
If he leases it for 7 years, he might sow flax the first year and he has a right to cut beams from the sycamore tree.
But if I make a deal for 7 years, okay, sow flax in the first year. And after 7 years, the ground will have recovered. You can't sow it in year 2 or 3 or 4. But for the first year, yes. And then there'll be enough time for the ground to be back to what it should be by the time the lease comes back to me, the owner. And the tree will have grown new branches after 7 years. So they say you got to give it back the way you got it. But you do have a little bit of time in the middle if you need to do flax or do the sycamore.
What's the attraction with 7 years?
Well,
Shows up in different places.
right. So how far back do you want to go? So you go back all the way to creation and
Okay.
as completion. 7 was considered a cycle of completion. But later on, as we're going to see, actually, is it next Mishnah, I think? Yes, in the next Mishnah, we were reminded that the sabbatical cycle
That was right. Yeah.
comes also with a 7-year regularity. So leasing it more than 7 years wouldn't really be a possibility. And then 7 groups of 7 years makes the Jubilee, the 49-year cycle. Okay. But speaking of 7 years, thank you for the segue. I think you're up for a reading.
If one leased a field from his fellow for a week of years, 7 years, for 700 zoos,
That's an amount of money.
the 7th year is included in the number.
And give us the contrast.
If he leased it for 7 years for 700 zoos, oh, for 7 years, not a week of years.
Exactly.
For 700 zoos, the 7th year is not included in the number.
Okay. So what's going on here? This is why we're good at contracts, because you look at the details, right? If I'm paying you 700 zoos to use your land for 7 years, that's the second clause. How many years do I get to use the land? 7, right? But wait a minute, but there's a sabbatical year every 7th year. Use the land during the 7th year, but I get to use it after the sabbatical year. So really, in total, I have control of the land for 8 years. Right? Because I couldn't use it in that year, so I used it for 7 years. 1 year wasn't used because of the sabbatical, so I get a makeup year. Make sense? Because I stipulated 7 years. But if I say I want to have it for a week of years, then I'm actually listing a length of time. Right? It'd be the equivalent in modern English of saying I want something from 2000 to 2007, right? That's a week of years. Sabbatical year is in here, tough, right? You don't get to use the land during the sabbatical year because God said no. And your 700 zoos is right there. But if I want it for 7 years, then it's going to be 2000 to 2007 plus 2008, so that I can have 6 years of use and 1 year of use, and actually get my 7 years that we made a deal for. Always read the fine print.
Exactly.
I
Need a lawyer all the time.
Well, lawyers get a bad rap, but the basic idea is words matter. And the way you phrase things and the way you say things, it matters. So, yes, be careful with your words. Okay, I think we can we can begin Mishnah 11. We got a late start. I wanna keep going. Mishnah 11, total change of topic. All right? Get the sharecropper out of your head. Natan, you had mentioned earlier, what if life is so bad that you have to sell yourself as a day laborer? Right? You can't even be a sharecropper anymore. You're just hoping, you're hanging around Home Depot and you want to get a job to help people on a construction site or help them in the field or something today, and then tomorrow you're going to do the same thing. And each day you go out, you work, you get paid. Wait, when do you get paid? Ta-da! So the Torah says that a workman's wages should not remain with you overnight. And the Mishnah wants to know, well, what does that mean exactly? Right? When are you obligated to pay the person who has done work for you? Make sense? Okay. So, Mishnah 11.
It's my turn.
It's your turn. 700 zuzim for 2000 to 2007.
That is
For rental.
The rental cost.
Yes, I know, for a centenary.
Yeah. Yes. A week of years.
So meaning that if it's also fail in the Shemitah, your problem. You
Yeah,
pay for it.
exactly. Well, there's always going to be one Shemitah in 7 years.
Okay.
It's like
Well,
saying
the
any
other
7
one is
days.
for 7 years, so they are 7 productive years.
Exactly. For 7 productive years. That's a good way to put it. And that's a difference of 1 year worth of leasing, of 1 year worth of working. So it makes a difference. Okay.
11. One that is hired during the day collects his wages all during the night, in the ensuing night.
Okay. So the wages shall not remain with you till the morning. The rabbis are saying, okay, so you've worked during the day. I have until morning to give you the money. But as long as it's still night, it's still okay. But as soon as morning happens, if I haven't paid you, I have transgressed, right? I've committed a sin by not giving you your wages.
When we saw this before? We saw this before.
It's in the Torah.
No, that's the Torah. In one of the Mishnah,
Not this particular one. I mean, maybe you read ahead, which is a very good student.
No. Are you sure we didn't see inside the green or something like that?
I don't remember reading exactly this, no.
About when you pay, I saw it before.
That's good. You've studied. And forgetfulness is God's way of letting us continue to learn and not think we already know it all. All right, yeah. Continue.
Okay. One that is hired during the night collects his wages all during the ensuing day.
All right, so this is where the Mishnah tries to do a little logic. If you're a day worker and the Torah says the money should not stay with the employer until morning, then if you're a night worker, well, does he have to pay you immediately at dawn? No, he gets the same amount of time on the other end, meaning during the rest of the daytime.
Is this because the day is considered starting at night, basically?
Not exactly. I mean, they seem to be just saying a day worker, the employer has until the next cycle changes to pay you, because that's the cycle of employment is, day and night, day and night. We're going to talk about hourly workers in the next part, but that's the basic block is day and night. Hourly workers, however, part 2.
One that is hired by the hour collects his wages all during the ensuing day or the ensuing night.
Right, so for an hourly worker, it's a little more unclear in the Torah when the person has to pay. And so they say, well, whenever you finish working, the rest of that day and the rest of that night, the employer should pay you. They have, you work during the day, so it's there. Or if you worked at night, they get the same amount of time at the other side. Make sense? Yeah. It's pretty straightforward. Part 3?
Part 3. If one was hired by the week, or by the month, or by the year, or by the week of years, if his time of hire expires during the day, he collects his wages all during the ensuing day.
And keep going.
If his time of hire expired during the night, he collects his wages all during the ensuing day and the night.
All right. So this is basically saying if you've got a much more long-term contract here, then the employer can get your funds together and ready and should have it right there ready to go, or at least immediately afterwards to cover that, because you've got time to make this arrangement. Oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and do Mishnah 12. And we'll just have to say.
So the person has that work, let's say 12 hours half day.
Right.
After the person ended the work.
Right. Basically. Right. I mean, their hours were relative to the amount of time. Half day is a good way of putting it.
After ending the work.
Right. And remember, the Torah was very clear that the reason was for this is that this money was for the guy's life. If someone has to hire themselves out by the day, then that is money they need to eat. So if you're not paying them in a timely manner, they don't eat. They're going to starve. They worked with you with an expectation that they would be given the money so they could feed themselves and their family then. And if you hold back that money, then you are hurting them directly. It's not just, oh, I'm sorry about, there was a problem with bookkeeping. This person only took this job because his stomach was empty. That's what day laborers were in the time of the Mishnah. That's why there's a little bit more leniency for the long-term workers, but also less leniency because we're expecting, there's more time to gather your wages to give them to you. All right, Mishnah 12. Oh, it's the time. Yes.
You must pay him his wages on the same day, and the wages of the laborer shall not remain with you until the morning. Apply both to hire of a man, or of a beast, or of utensils.
Right. So if I rent your cow, if I rent your plow, if I, rent anything of yours or you, then I have to pay you in this way. That it's not just your wages, it's wages for anything of yours that I have had to pay to use for the day. That's what they're trying to say here. This covers a broader range of things. However, timing is still an issue.
Where is this so? When the employee has laid claim to it, but if he has not laid claim to it, the employer does not commit that transgression.
All right. If I have your money by tomorrow morning and I still haven't paid it to you, I haven't sinned unless you have already asked for it.
And if you are shy.
If you are shy, if you're shy, you're going to starve to death. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing to be shy about. You made the agreement to work. You did the work. If you come to the boss and say, hey, I need to be paid now, like we agreed, the boss has the time that we just discussed to pay you. And if he doesn't pay you, then he's committing a transgression. On the other hand, if you say, I'll get it from you tomorrow. It's no big deal. No, you better take it now or else I'm sinning. You can leave it until the guy actually makes the claim for it. And indeed, this is why you can make agreements to say I'll pay you for the week, or I'll pay you in a month, or I'll pay you next year. You can make those agreements as long as the person isn't making the claim to it. But if he needs the money now, if he's claiming it, you have to pay him. Makes sense, right? Because again, it's trying to protect the most vulnerable person in this particular relationship, the day worker.
If he gave him a draft on a shopkeeper or money changer, the employer does not commit a transgression, even though the employee has not yet collected.
Hooray! I can give you a check. Right? And this is the equivalent of a check in the ancient world. So I would give you a piece of paper that says, go to Mr. Smith, the grocer, and he'll pay you. Or go to the money changer and he'll give you the money. This was a way that people would handle money, because not everybody would always have money in their pockets. But they would have an agreement with the shopkeeper or an agreement with the money changer to take care of these payment steps for them. And even though you don't have the money in your fingers, because you have the check, I'm okay. I didn't sin. That's what we're learning here. Good? Onward.
If he gave him a draft,
Next part,
Okay.
part 4.
if an employee claimed his wages, within the set time he may take an oath and take his wages.
All right, so this will be a little confusing, and why you always want to give and get a receipt. Imagine I'm the worker, and I finished my day, and I go to the boss man, and I say, hey, I need you to pay me for my work. And he says, I've already paid you. Well, what? When? What? I paid you. Okay, so we're going to go to the court. We go to the court, and the court says, you know, what's your problem? And you say, well, he hasn't paid me. And they say, well, did you pay him? And he says, yes, I paid them. And they say, well, when was the payment supposed to be? And he's like, well, he came to me during the evening after he had finished work. All right, comes back to me. Do you swear? Do you take an oath that he hasn't paid you? Yes, I swear that I haven't been paid. All right, pay him. Right, the oath is enough of an evidence. If there are no witnesses, and there's no receipts and other things that can prove that you already got paid, the oath is enough to force the employer to pay, even if the person's lying, to end up having to pay a second time, because we have no other proof and we are going to side with him during this time. However, part A.
But if the set time had passed, he may not take an oath and take his wages.
Right, but if the time's already passed, if it's like a week later, I can't show up and say, hey, pay me. And the guy says, I paid you a week ago, right, in the evening. And we go to the court, and the court says, did you pay? And he says, yes. Did you get your money? No. And he says, well, when did you come and ask for the money? I came yesterday. But wait a minute, I thought you said you worked last week. Yeah, but I only came. No. You get, it has to be an immediate claim. If you wait a week, we assume you were paid, and now a week's gone by and you just want more. And so you don't get to run that scam, because a worker wants to be paid when a worker wants to be paid. And again, sorry, Natan, if you're shy, that's a problem.
It's very consistent with the rest.
It is. However, what?
They assume that the money is not going into a checking account.
Of course.
They go and buy food for himself and for the family.
Exactly.
But also, if you go to a check account, it's not your business. It's his money. He worked hard.
Right.
He can do whatever he wants with his money. It's not your money.
Right. Once you've had to pay him, once you've earned the money. Exactly. However, a little twist. Part 1 under 4A. If witnesses.
If witnesses testify that he had claimed his wages at the set time and was not paid, he may take an oath and receive his wages.
So I say, wait a minute. I came to him last Tuesday and I demanded my money and he said no. And now I'm coming back a week later to get my money. Maybe like he even told me to come back, because sometimes they'd say, come back next week, even though it's a transgression. You know, maybe I came back next week. And Bob and Joe, they were there. And they saw me demand my money. Okay, now take an oath and you can get paid.
They don't call Bob and...
Oh, no, they call the witnesses. Yeah, they call the witnesses. And what did you see? What did you say? Where were they? And all of that. But if you have witnesses...
Even if they call them, he still has to swear.
Yeah, because there's still no proof that he didn't get paid. I mean, what if he got paid the next day when Bob and Joe weren't there? They can't say what happened during the whole week. But they can say, yes, we saw him make the claim at the time, and he didn't get paid at that time. Right. And then one last little finish.
The law, you must pay him his wages on Sunday, applies also to the resident alien. But not the law, the wages of the labor shall not remain with you until the morning.
Right. So there is more. You are on the main required to pay a resident alien the same way that you pay anyone else, but there is a little more flexibility in delaying that payment. You still have to pay them, right? You're not allowed to take advantage of them, but you can delay slightly, and the full implications of this is beyond our discussion for today. All right, so we're going to leave it there. We missed by one Mishnah, but Mishnah 13 is a whole different topic, so we will cover that next week and continue on with chapter 10.